I was 16 years old when my mother dropped me off at my father's house with a suitcase and never came back. For most of my life, I had been taught one simple truth. My father was a deadbeat, a liar, a man who didn't care enough to show up, didn't care enough to pay, didn't care enough to be a real parent. That's what my mother told me every time the rent was late, every time the fridge was empty, every time she came home exhausted from her second job. She said it was his fault. So when she told me I'd be staying with him for a month while she went on her honeymoon, I didn't argue, I didn't complain, I didn't even question it. Because I thought I knew who he was. I thought I knew the story. I didn't know that while I was boarding that plane, my mother had already quit her jobs. I didn't know she'd sold our furniture. I didn't know she'd packed up our apartment and erased my place in her life. And I definitely didn't know that my father had been sending child support every single month for 13 years, while my mother told me he'd never sent a dime. The moment that broke me didn't happen at the airport. It didn't happen on the plane. It didn't even happen when my dad picked me up and smiled like he was seeing me for the first time. It happened that night when he put my mom on speakerphone and she calmly told me I wasn't coming home, that she needed to focus on her new marriage, that her new husband wasn't comfortable having a teenage girl around, that Minnesota no longer existed for me. In less than 10 minutes, my entire childhood collapsed. The woman I trusted had lied to me for 16 years. The man I hated had been waiting for me the whole time. And I was left sitting on a couch in a stranger's house, realizing that the story I'd built my identity on was a lie. This isn't just a story about abandonment. It's a story about manipulation, about money stolen in my name, about a mother who erased her own child to start over, and about what happens when the truth finally catches up. My name is Jessica, and I was 16 when this happened. 16 is an age where people think you're old enough to understand, but still young enough that adults believe they can move you around like luggage, old enough to be blamed for tension in a relationship, but not old enough to have a say in where you belong. For as long as I can remember, my life had one permanent setting: Minnesota, a small apartment, and my mom's constant exhaustion. My mother's name is Rebecca. She was 42 then, still pretty, still sharp, still capable of turning any conversation into a story where she was the hero and everyone else was the villain. When I was little, I believed every word out of her mouth, because when you're a kid, you don't have the option to doubt the person feeding you dinner. The dinner wasn't always much. Sometimes it was spaghetti stretched for 3 nights. Sometimes it was cereal that tasted like cardboard because we bought the cheapest box. Sometimes it was peanut butter on white bread, eaten quietly, while my mom stared at her phone like it had personally betrayed her. And whenever I asked the obvious question, why is it always like this? Why are we always stressed? Why can't we ever just breathe? She'd answer with the same name: Marcus, my father. Your father doesn't pay. Your father doesn't care. Your father is selfish. Your father is a loser. Those weren't just insults. They were bedtime stories in our house. They were repeated so often they became part of the air. And the more she said them, the more I absorbed them like they were facts carved into stone. I barely saw him growing up, 4 or 5 times total. I can remember the outline of those visits more than the details. He'd show up in Minnesota for work, maybe stay a day or 2. My mother would become a different person, colder, stiffer, tight around the mouth. She'd keep her arms crossed, her tone clipped, like she was tolerating a stranger in her home. And I learned from her. I was polite, but distant. I didn't run into his arms. I didn't ask him questions. I didn't treat him like a parent, because in my head, he hadn't earned it. I thought we lived small because he refused to help. I thought my mom was struggling because she was abandoned. And I thought I was loyal for hating him. Rebecca worked a lot, or at least that's what she always said. 2 jobs, a grocery store, and a cleaning company. She loved saying that part out loud because it sounded like sacrifice. She'd come home with that sharp smell of disinfectant and cold air clinging to her coat, and I'd feel guilty for asking for anything: new shoes, a field trip fee, even a birthday dinner that wasn't from the frozen aisle. Sometimes she'd look at me like I was both her reason to keep going and her reason she couldn't stop. I didn't have siblings. It was just the 2 of us. That meant our relationship was intense in a way I didn't understand until later. Too close, too fused, too much like I was her emotional partner instead of her daughter. When she was happy, the whole apartment felt lighter. When she was angry, the walls felt smaller. And she was angry a lot. Not always at me directly, but at life, at men, at money, at time, at the way everything required effort. She'd say things like, "You don't know how hard I work for you," and I'd nod because I didn't want to be ungrateful, because I didn't want her to look at me like I was one more burden. She remarried twice when I was growing up. The first time I was 7, and I remember thinking it was like, finally, someone was going to rescue us. Like maybe my mom wouldn't have to be tired all the time. Like maybe I'd have a stable, normal family the way other kids did. That marriage lasted 2 years. After it ended, my mom didn't cry in front of me. She didn't melt down. She got colder. She said, "Men can't handle responsibility." And then she looked at me and added, "Especially when there's a kid involved." It landed wrong in my chest, like she was saying I was the reason. The second marriage happened when I was 12. It lasted about a year and a half. By then, I'd learned not to get attached. I'd learned to keep my hopes small so they hurt less when they broke. Each time, my mother framed it the same way. They couldn't handle having a stepdaughter around. They didn't want the baggage. They wanted me to choose them over you. And I believed her, because why wouldn't I? She was my mother, and she always sounded so certain, so wounded, so righteous, that doubting her felt like betrayal. Then, in March, she started dating a man named Derek, 38. He moved in quickly, within a couple of months, and the apartment shifted. The space that used to feel cramped but familiar started feeling tense. Derek was the type of man who didn't raise his voice often. He didn't have to. He had this way of sighing when I walked into the room, like my presence was an inconvenience. He'd make little comments while my mom laughed like it was harmless. "Teenagers are expensive. She takes up a lot of space. Must be nice to have no bills." He'd say it with a smirk, like he was joking, but his eyes never joked. And my mom would laugh with him. That's the part that should have been a warning. But when you've spent your whole life believing your mom is on your side, you don't recognize the moment she stops being your ally. In early June, she sat me down at our tiny kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg we'd been meaning to fix for years. Her hands were folded, her voice calm, too calm, like she'd rehearsed it. She told me Derek wanted to take her on a month-long road trip through Canada. "A honeymoon," she said, smiling like she expected me to be happy for her. That word hit me weird because I hadn't known they were engaged. Then she admitted they'd gotten married at the courthouse the week before, without telling me. I remember blinking at her, my brain trying to catch up. My mother, who narrated every detail of her life to me like I was her diary, had done something huge without me. And before I could fully process that, she slid the final piece across the table like it was nothing. She'd already bought me a plane ticket to Oregon, to stay with my dad, for a month. She said it like she was offering me a vacation, like this was a normal arrangement between co-parents, like I should be grateful she'd planned it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just felt hollow. Because even though I hated my dad, he was still a stranger. And a month is a long time to live with a stranger when you've been trained your whole life to fear him. I asked, "Why can't I just stay with Grandma?" Rebecca waved it off. "This makes more sense." Derek didn't say much during that conversation. He was leaned against the counter, scrolling on his phone, not looking at me. But I could feel the satisfaction in his silence, like he'd already won something. In the days leading up to the flight, my mom was upbeat, energetic, lighter than she'd been in a long time. She talked about the trip nonstop, lakes, mountains, cute little towns, the freedom of the open road. She hugged me goodbye at the airport and told me she'd call every few days. Her perfume was strong in my hair when she pulled back. She smiled and said, "It'll be fine, Jess. It's just a month." I believed her, because at that point, I still didn't understand that my mother didn't see me as a person she had to protect. She saw me as something she could set down when it didn't fit her new life. And I walked onto that plane thinking I was being temporarily relocated. I didn't know I was being discarded. The first crack in my understanding of everything happened less than 30 minutes after I landed in Oregon. I remember stepping out of the airport with my backpack digging into one shoulder, scanning the crowd for a man I barely recognized. I expected someone older looking, tired, maybe sloppy. That's what I'd been taught to picture. Instead, I saw a man standing near the curb, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the automatic doors like he didn't want to miss me. Marcus, my father. He looked normal, put together, clean haircut, button-down shirt. He smiled when he saw me, not the forced kind, but the kind that reaches the eyes and then hesitates, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to show it. "Hey, Jess," he said softly. I nodded. I didn't hug him. He didn't push it. The drive to his house was quiet at first. Oregon looked different from Minnesota, more green, more space, less gray. I stared out the window and tried to remind myself this was temporary. Then he started talking. Casual things at first, asking about the flight, asking if I was hungry, asking what subjects I liked in school. It felt awkward, but not uncomfortable. And then he said something that didn't make sense. "We should talk about getting you enrolled for the fall," he said, eyes still on the road. "I've already checked the district requirements." I turned to him slowly. "Enrolled here?" "Yeah," he replied. "High school registration opens in a few weeks, but we can get a head start." My stomach dropped. "I'm only here for a month," I said. I remember how firm my voice sounded, like I needed to anchor myself to the lie. "My mom's on her honeymoon." Marcus frowned, not defensively, not angrily, confused. "Your mom told me you were moving in permanently," he said. "She said this was the plan." The air in the car changed. It got heavier, like we'd both walked into a room we weren't supposed to be in yet. "That's not true," I said quickly. "She didn't say that to me." He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He just nodded slowly, like he was rearranging something in his head. "We'll talk about it later," he said. "No pressure. Let's just get you home." But I didn't feel relieved. I felt uneasy. His house was in a quiet neighborhood. Not fancy, not run down, just stable. The kind of place where people mowed their lawns and waved at each other. Inside, it smelled like food. Actual food, not air freshener covering up stress. Something was simmering on the stove. That's when I met Linda. She came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, smiling like she'd been waiting for me. "You must be Jessica," she said warmly. "I'm so glad you're here." She hugged me, gently, like she didn't want to overwhelm me. That alone was strange. My mother hugged me too, but her hugs always felt like possession. Linda's felt like welcome. Then 2 kids appeared behind her, a girl with dark curls and curious eyes, a boy clutching a toy car, peeking out from behind her leg. "This is Emma," Linda said, gesturing to the girl. "She's 10, and Cole, 8. My half-siblings. I hadn't even known they existed. No one had ever told me my dad had a family." The house itself felt lived in a way I wasn't used to. Photos on the walls, not staged, not curated, just moments. And then I saw something that made my throat tighten. A photo of me. Me at maybe 6 or 7, sitting awkwardly on a bench next to my dad. Another of me holding a stuffed animal, clearly taken during one of those rare visits. They weren't hidden away. They were framed, displayed. I didn't say anything. I just swallowed hard. That night, after dinner, Marcus asked if we could talk. He suggested calling my mom to clear up the confusion. He said it calmly, like he assumed this was all just a misunderstanding. He put her on speaker. I sat on the couch, my hands clenched in my lap, waiting for her to laugh and say, "Of course it's temporary." Instead, her voice came through the phone, bright, rushed, distracted. "Yes, Marcus, that's right," she said. "I've decided it's better for Jessica to stay with you permanently." I felt my chest cave in. "What?" I whispered. She kept talking, like she hadn't just detonated my life. "Derek and I need time to focus on our marriage. And honestly, he's not comfortable having a teenage girl in the house. This is best for everyone." "When were you going to tell me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I thought it would be easier once you were already there," she replied, irritated now. "You're old enough to handle this." Old enough to handle being abandoned. She told me she'd quit her jobs, given notice on our apartment, sold most of our furniture. "There's nothing for you to come back to," she said. "You'll be fine." The call lasted maybe 10 minutes. When it ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Marcus didn't speak right away. Linda didn't either. They looked at me like they were waiting for me to break. I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the floor, trying to understand how my mother had managed to rewrite my life without ever asking me. That night, I lay in a bed that wasn't mine, in a house I hadn't known existed, realizing something terrifying. If my mom could lie about this, what else had she lied about? And for the first time, the story I'd been told about my father started to feel unstable, like a house built on sand. The moment everything truly shattered didn't happen all at once. It came in pieces, quiet, methodical, impossible to ignore once they started stacking up. The first real blow landed about a week after I moved in. By then, the initial shock had dulled into something heavier. Not pain exactly, more like disorientation. I kept expecting my phone to buzz with a message from my mom saying there'd been a misunderstanding, that she missed me, that she wanted me back. Instead, the days passed in a way that felt unsettlingly normal. Marcus went to work every morning. Linda worked from a small office at the back of the house, talking to clients about taxes and numbers I didn't understand. Emma and Cole played, argued, laughed. Dinner happened at the same time every night. No one yelled, no one slammed doors, no one complained about money. That alone felt wrong. One evening after dinner, Marcus asked if I wanted to go for a walk. The sky was soft and orange, the air cooler than Minnesota. I agreed because saying no felt rude, and because I didn't know what else to do with myself. We walked a block in silence before I finally asked the question that had been circling my mind for days. Did you really never send child support? He stopped walking. Slowly, carefully, he turned to face me. Why would you ask that? He said. Not defensive, not angry, just confused. Because my mom said you didn't, I replied. She said that's why we were always struggling. He let out a breath through his nose and rubbed the back of his neck. Jess, he said quietly, I've been paying child support every month since the divorce. The words didn't land. They slid off me, like my brain refused to absorb them. That's not possible, I said automatically. She wouldn't lie about that. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't try to convince me. Instead, he said, Do you want to see something? He led me back to the house and into Linda's home office. Linda looked up from her computer when we came in, immediately reading the tension in the room. What's going on? She asked gently. Marcus explained. Linda didn't gasp. She didn't look shocked. She just nodded and opened a filing cabinet. She pulled out a thick folder. Then another. Then another. She laid them out on the desk one by one. Bank statements, court documents, payment records. 13 years worth. Every month. On time. Without fail. I sat down because my legs suddenly didn't trust me. Linda pointed to dates, amounts, account numbers. She explained how the payments worked, how they were processed, how they were tracked. This isn't something you can fake, she said softly. It's all court-ordered. There's a paper trail. My ears started ringing. So, where did the money go? I asked. No one answered right away. Marcus finally said, That's a question I've been asking myself for a long time. He told me that after the divorce, he'd tried to get more visitation, that he'd filed motions, that he'd asked for phone calls, holidays, summers. And every time my mom had pushed back. She said it would disrupt your routine, he said, that it wasn't in your best interest. I remembered how she'd always gotten upset when I asked about visiting him, how she'd said he didn't care enough to try. But according to the paperwork in front of me, he had tried. Over and over. And she'd said no. Something inside me cracked. All those years I'd looked at him with disappointment. All those times I'd kept my distance. All those moments I'd silently judged him. I'd been punishing the wrong person. The realization didn't feel like relief. It felt like grief. That night, I went to my room and cried quietly into my pillow so no one would hear me. I cried for the childhood I thought I understood. I cried for the anger I'd carried for someone who didn't deserve it. And I cried because the person I trusted most, the person who was supposed to protect me, had built my world on a lie. Over the next few days, more pieces fell into place. I noticed the fridge was always full. The lights were never turned off to save money. Bills weren't whispered about. Marcus cooked from scratch, real meals. Linda helped Emma with homework while Cole played at the table. It was calm, predictable, safe. And the more normal it felt, the more disturbing my memories of home became. I called my mom. No answer. I texted. No response. When she finally called back days later, she sounded annoyed. I'm on vacation, Jessica, she said. I don't want to deal with drama. When I tried to tell her what I'd learned, she cut me off. I don't want to rehash the past, she snapped. I did what I had to do. That was the moment it clicked. She wasn't confused. She wasn't overwhelmed. She had planned this. And I wasn't a mistake. I was inconvenient. Shock doesn't always look like screaming or crying. Sometimes it looks like waking up the next morning and going through the motions, like your body is on autopilot, while your mind quietly unravels. That's what the days after the discovery felt like for me. I woke up in a clean, quiet house where no one was angry at the world. I ate breakfast at a table where people talked about their plans for the day instead of money. I sat in a room that had been prepared for me. Fresh sheets, a small desk, space that was actually mine. And none of it felt real. I kept thinking, if my mom lied about this, then what else did she lie about? Every memory started replaying itself with a different filter. The nights she came home late and tired, was that really about work? The constant comments about my dad being useless, were those about truth or control? The way she always needed me on her side, was that love or something else? I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. That guilt sat heavy in my chest. Because if I'd known, if I'd questioned her even once, maybe I wouldn't have spent years resenting a man who was quietly trying to be there for me. Marcus didn't push me. He didn't ask me to apologize. He didn't say I told you so. He didn't talk badly about my mom, even after everything. Instead, he gave me space. One afternoon, I found him in the garage, working on something I didn't recognize. I stood there for a minute before speaking. "I'm sorry," I said. He looked up, genuinely confused. "For what?" "For how I treated you," I replied. "I thought you didn't care." He wiped his hands on a rag and leaned against the workbench. "I get it," he said. "You believe what you were told. That doesn't make you a bad person." That was it. No guilt trip, no lecture, just understanding. And that somehow hurt more than anger would have. Meanwhile, my mom drifted further away. She called twice during her first week of traveling. Both times, she sounded distracted, like I was interrupting something more important. "How's Oregon?" she asked, barely listening to the answer. "Everything fine there?" "Good, good." Then the calls stopped. When I tried reaching her, she didn't pick up. When she finally did, she snapped that she didn't want to deal with problems while she was trying to enjoy herself. That was the moment I understood something devastating. She didn't miss me. I was 16 years old and suddenly realized I had been replaced, not by a job, not by stress, but by a man who didn't want me around. That realization sank in slowly, painfully. Marcus and Linda started talking to me about practical things: school enrollment, classes, schedules. Linda took me shopping for clothes and supplies like this was just normal. They set up my room properly. Linda let me choose paint samples. Emma insisted I hang posters. Cole showed me where the best snacks were hidden. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I kept waiting for someone to say, "This is temporary." But no one did. One evening, I finally asked Marcus the question that had been haunting me. "Why didn't you ever tell me the truth?" I asked. "About the money, about everything." He sat quietly for a moment before answering. "Because I didn't want you to feel like you had to choose," he said. "And because I hoped one day you'd see things for yourself." That realization hurt almost as much as the lies, because it meant that while my mom had been building my loyalty through fear and blame, my dad had been protecting me from adult conflict, even when it cost him my love. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the house. And for the first time, I allowed myself to ask a terrifying question. What if the person I trusted most had never really been on my side at all? The truth didn't explode. It spread, slowly, quietly, like ink seeping into water, turning everything darker, whether I wanted it to or not. About 3 weeks after I moved in, my mom finally called again. I saw her name on my phone and felt that familiar pull in my chest, the reflex to answer, to hope, to believe she might finally say something that made sense. I picked up. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask about school or Oregon or whether I was okay. She went straight to what she needed. "Jessica," she said, her voice suddenly careful, almost sweet, "I need a favor." That was the moment I knew. She explained that Derek's family was coming to visit soon, that they were excited to meet her, that things were going well and she didn't want to complicate them. Then she said the sentence that changed how I saw her forever. "I told them I don't have kids." I didn't respond right away. I thought maybe I'd misheard her. "What?" I finally said. She sighed like I was being difficult. "I told them you've always lived with your dad," she continued. "It's just easier that way." Easier. For her. She wanted me to lie, to pretend she hadn't raised me, to erase 16 years of my existence so she could fit into someone else's life more cleanly. "What am I supposed to say if they ask about my childhood?" I asked quietly. "Just say your parents had joint custody," she replied quickly. "That you split your time. It's not a big deal." I felt something inside me go cold. She wasn't asking because she was ashamed of what she'd done. She was asking because she was ashamed of me. When I told her I wasn't comfortable lying, she snapped. "You're being selfish," she said. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to blend families? You're acting like this is some huge betrayal when it's just a simple request." A simple request. To pretend my mother had never been my mother. The call ended with her hanging up on me. I sat on my bed afterward, staring at the wall, feeling like I'd been punched somewhere I couldn't protect. That night, Marcus asked if everything was okay. I told him what happened. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. Then he went to his laptop. He showed me emails, months old, between him and my mom. Messages sent before she even met Derek. Messages where she talked about needing a change and asked if I could live with him full time. He had responded carefully, asking if she'd talked to me yet, asking if I was comfortable, asking to involve me in the decision. She'd said yes. She'd lied. She'd been planning this long before Derek ever entered the picture, which meant the narrative she'd fed me, that Derek couldn't handle having a stepdaughter, was probably just a convenient excuse. I wasn't the problem. I was the solution. The solution to her wanting a fresh start. Then Linda discovered something else. She found records showing my mom had been receiving state assistance for years as a single mother with a dependent child, while also receiving child support. She'd been collecting money from every possible direction while telling everyone she was barely surviving. Suddenly, the constant money stress made sense. Not because we didn't have enough, but because the money wasn't being used for me. The lies weren't accidental. They were strategic. Around that time, I started noticing my mom's online presence. Linda helped me find accounts I didn't know existed. On them, my mom was presenting herself as child-free, newly married, starting over. There were photos of her apartment after I left, described as our first home together, posts about a honeymoon adventure for two. No mention of me, no trace. I'd been edited out of her life like a draft she didn't want anyone to see. Meanwhile, my life in Oregon kept moving forward. Marcus enrolled me in school. Linda helped me catch up academically. Emma and Cole treated me like I'd always belonged. The contrast was brutal. One family was quietly choosing me every day. The other had erased me completely. And the more the truth piled up, the clearer it became. My mother wasn't confused. She wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't trying her best. She was choosing herself. And she had been for a long time. The lowest point didn't come with yelling. It came in the quiet. It came late one night when everyone else was asleep and the house felt too still, like it was holding its breath. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every version of my mother in my head. The one who braided my hair before school. The one who cried when she said she was doing everything for us. The one who told me we were a team. And then the version who had erased me. Those two images wouldn't reconcile. My mind kept trying to force them together, like if I thought hard enough, I could find a version of her that made sense. But there wasn't one. That realization hollowed me out. I felt grief in a way I'd never experienced before. Not for someone who had died, but for someone who was still alive and had chosen to stop being my mother. I cried silently so no one would hear. I pressed my face into the pillow and bit my lip to keep from making a sound because some part of me still felt embarrassed for hurting, like I was weak for letting it get to me. At 16, I'd already learned how to shrink myself. I blamed myself. Maybe if I'd been easier. Maybe if I'd been quieter. Maybe if I'd taken up less space. Maybe then she wouldn't have needed to erase me. That thought scared me because it felt so natural. I realized how deeply her voice lived inside my head. The next day, my grandmother called. Her name is Patricia. She lives in Wisconsin, and growing up, my mom always controlled when and if we spoke. I hadn't heard from her in years. She sounded worried. She told me she'd been trying to reach my mom for weeks, that she needed surgery and wanted to let her know, that none of her calls or letters had been answered. I hesitated before telling her the truth. Then I told her everything. There was a long silence on the line. Finally, she said something that made my stomach drop. "Your mother called me in May," she said. "She asked if I'd be willing to take you for the summer." My hands started shaking. Patricia explained that my mom had said she was struggling financially, that she needed time to get back on her feet, that she was overwhelmed. Patricia had agreed. Then, days later, my mom called back and said she'd found another solution. She never explained what that solution was, which meant my dad hadn't even been her first choice. I wasn't sent to him because she thought it was best for me. I was sent because she needed someone to take me. Anyone. I hung up the phone and sat there staring at nothing, feeling something inside me finally break. I wasn't abandoned suddenly. I was offloaded. Like responsibility passed along quietly so she could walk away clean. That night I didn't cry. I felt numb. I went through the motions of dinner, homework, showering, like my body knew what to do, even if my heart didn't. When I got back to my room, I closed the door and sat on the floor with my back against it. And for the first time, I allowed myself to say the truth out loud, even if only in a whisper. My mom didn't love me the way a mother should. Saying it hurt, but pretending otherwise hurt more. That was the moment I stopped waiting for her to come back. That was the moment I stopped hoping she'd explain. That was the moment I realized the version of my childhood I'd been clinging to never really existed, and I was standing at the edge of something terrifying. A life where I had to rebuild my identity without the person who shaped it. The shift didn't come from confrontation. It came from clarity. It happened slowly, over the course of weeks, as the truth stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like information. Painful information, but solid, real. Something I could stand on instead of drowning in. The first real turning point came through my grandmother. After our call, Patricia didn't disappear. She started calling every week. Sometimes just to ask how school was going. Sometimes to tell me stories about when my mom was younger. Stories my mother had never shared. Not the dramatic ones. The patterns. How my mom had always struggled with responsibility. How she moved on quickly when things became difficult. how she borrowed money from family members with promises she never quite kept. Patricia told me, gently, that she wished she'd asked more questions years ago, that she'd believed my mom when she said visits were too complicated. I should have fought harder, she said. I'm sorry. That apology mattered more than she probably knew. Then my Aunt Jennifer entered the picture. She's my mom's younger sister, someone I'd barely known because my mom always said they weren't close. Jennifer reached out after being contacted by someone from Derek's family. Apparently, Derek's sister had found old photos of my mom with me and started asking questions. Questions my mom couldn't answer cleanly. Jennifer called Patricia confused and concerned. That's when the full story started spreading. My abandonment, the lies, the money. Jennifer was angry. Not at me, at my mom. She admitted she'd lent my mom money over the years, thousands of dollars, because she believed she was struggling to raise me alone without child support. Patricia admitted the same. They realized they'd been manipulated too. And suddenly, the narrative my mom had controlled for years started unraveling. Not because I exposed her, but because lies can't survive contact with reality forever. Jennifer confronted my mom. According to her, my mom was defensive, dismissive. She claimed sending me to my dad was for my own good, that I was difficult, that I'd been interfering with her relationship. Hearing that hurt, but it didn't devastate me the way it would have months earlier. Because by then, I understood. This wasn't about me. It never had been. Jennifer demanded repayment of the money my mom had borrowed under false pretenses. My mom accused her of betrayal and blocked her. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. My mom didn't cut people off because they were cruel. She cut them off because they stopped being useful. That realization changed everything. Instead of wondering what I'd done wrong, I started asking a different question. What kind of life do I want now? Marcus and Linda talked to me about formalizing custody. Not as a threat, not as pressure, but as stability. They wanted to make sure my mom couldn't pull me back into chaos if her life fell apart. I agreed. Not out of anger, out of self-preservation. I started seeing a counselor at school. I talked about guilt, about loyalty, about the strange grief of losing someone who's still alive, about learning that love shouldn't require shrinking yourself. And slowly, I started to feel stronger. I joined activities at school. I made friends. I laughed without feeling like I was doing something wrong. Emma and Cole stopped feeling like strangers and started feeling like siblings. Linda became someone I trusted, not because she replaced my mom, but because she showed up consistently. Marcus gave me space to lead every decision about my mom. He never pushed forgiveness, never demanded loyalty. That alone taught me what real parenting looked like. I didn't confront my mother. I didn't need to, because the truth had already done what confrontation never could. It stripped away her power. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't living in reaction to her choices. I was choosing myself. Consequences don't always arrive loudly. Sometimes they show up quietly, in closed doors, unanswered calls, and stories that no longer hold together when told out loud. That's how my mom's world started to collapse. It began with Derek's family. They kept asking questions my mom couldn't answer without contradicting herself. Why she'd said she was never married before. Why she'd claimed she had no children. Why old photos existed that didn't match her carefully constructed story. Eventually, they stopped asking her and started investigating. According to my Aunt Jennifer, Derek's parents hired someone to look into my mom's background after too many inconsistencies piled up. What they found wasn't dramatic, it was worse. Patterns, debt from previous marriages, financial instability masked as independence, government assistance collected under false claims, years of child support she'd insisted never existed. The version of herself she'd sold to Derek's family didn't survive scrutiny. The pressure fractured her marriage. 4 months later, my grandmother called to tell me Rebecca and Derek were getting divorced. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt distance, like watching something happen to someone I used to know. My mom had to move out of the apartment in Arizona. She stayed with friends, then different friends. Nothing stuck. The fresh start she'd chased turned out to be built on the same foundation as everything else, avoidance and lies. And when her new life fell apart, she reached backward, through Patricia. She asked for my number, asked where I was living, said she wanted to reconcile. Patricia called my dad before answering her. Marcus sat me down and told me the truth, without judgment, without pressure. Whatever you want to do, he said, we'll support. I thought about it for a long time. Then I said no, not out of spite, out of clarity. I wasn't ready to reopen a door that had crushed me when it closed. Patricia told my mom I didn't want contact. According to her, my mom reacted with anger, called me ungrateful, accused me of holding grudges. She still didn't understand. A few weeks later, she tried again. She somehow got my dad's number and called when she knew I'd be home. Linda answered and asked if I wanted to take the call. I didn't. My mom left a long voicemail, crying, apologizing vaguely, saying she was confused, scared, overwhelmed. She said she missed me, said she wanted to explain. I listened once, then I deleted it, because explanations without accountability are just noise. Meanwhile, my life kept moving forward. Marcus and Linda completed the legal process to establish permanent custody. My mom didn't contest it. School improved. My grades went up. I joined the debate team. I started thinking about college, something that had never felt real before. Emma and Cole became constants. Linda became someone I trusted deeply. Marcus became my anchor. And my mom, she faded. Not because I erased her, but because she'd already erased herself from my life long before. The fallout didn't punish her. It revealed her, and I didn't need to watch it any longer. It's been over a year since my mother put me on a plane and walked away. I'm 17 now, almost 18, and for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm bracing for the ground to disappear beneath my feet. Life in Oregon is steady. I wake up in a house where no one is keeping score, where love isn't conditional on convenience, where support doesn't come with guilt attached. School is going well. I'm a junior, involved in the drama club and debate team, and I'm actually thinking about college applications, something that once felt impossible. My grades are better than they've ever been, not because I suddenly became smarter, but because I'm no longer surviving. I'm living. Marcus and Linda have made it clear they'll help me however they can, financially, emotionally, practically, no strings attached. Emma and Cole don't treat me like a guest anymore. They treat me like a sister. Emma steals my clothes. Cole asks me for help with homework and video games. It's loud sometimes, messy, real. Patricia visits a few times a year now. She fills in pieces of family history I never had access to. She listens. She shows up. Jennifer checks in regularly too. Both of them remind me that my mother's choices don't define my worth. As for my mom, I don't know what she's doing now. And for the first time, that doesn't keep me up at night. I've accepted that she may never take responsibility, that she may always see herself as the victim of circumstances instead of the architect of her own destruction. I've also accepted that I don't need closure from her to move forward. Some people will tell you that blood means everything, that family should always be forgiven, that walking away is cruel. I don't believe that anymore. I've learned that family isn't about who gave birth to you. It's about who protects you, who tells you the truth, who shows up when things get hard. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop begging someone to care. Being abandoned by my mother felt like the end of my world. But it wasn't. It was the beginning of a life built on honesty instead of fear. And that's a future I'm choosing every single day.